the thing flipping back up because it's like, well, he's running the thing, so he's going to push it back up and not get crushed because it needs.
I would challenge that with one point because it was the conversation about how she enchants people happens after they're already off the train as they're walking to the city when he's kind of asking her, how do you enchant people and stuff like that.
But
that's what I would question. But
he knows how to enchant people, though. He's done it before. He did it with Hawkeye. So he's done it.
But that was with the scepter,
right?
With the
which is true.
Stone.
Yeah, which is definitely true.
And I don't know if that enhances it to be able to, if he has the enchanting power, and that enhances it to be able to, control it, for more than however long. But I don't know. I mean, that would be super crazy and super interesting, but I wouldn't get my hopes up because every time we get our hopes up on something cool like that, it never happens.
That's very true. That's very true. It is going to be interesting to see how. I mean, something's going to have to happen. So whether, either he has the whatever the hell they call it, the door opening things. I forget what they called it.
Or Owen Wilson shows up. That could.
Well, that's like the other option that we haven't been talking about, right? Like come on, guys, like let's So wow. that is the other option that he could show up. They said he's not saying wow, which I'm a little upset about. Like I'm a little annoyed that they brought Owen Wilson in and he's not doing at least once. Just do once. I feel like that needs to be like a requirement every time he does something.
Right. We kind of talked about the background a bit, but that train scene, I love that train scene. I love seeing Loki up there, whether it's in her mind or not, and singing the Asgardian songs and the drinking songs and like the whole little fight scene and his witty banter when he's fighting the guy, then they just throw him out the window. Like I thought all of that was just very, very well done. I loved it, and also the comedian high points of him when they stumble onto that little shack and she gets blasted and then he transforms into her husband and she just blasts him out the window too. And those are Loki's little isms that he has where he brings comedy value to the show is great too. I love the Loki character. He's just one of my favorites. So we have 3 episodes left of Loki, and we'll see where his story arc goes from there.
It's so good. It really is, and it's definitely interesting, and people are throwing out things in the chat, which is totally true. Like it's S is saying that he gave that look to Owen Wilson before he jumped through. That that he's kind of still on their side. I think that he is still on their side. I mean, it's there's a few things we got to figure out, and we talked about this last week, and but I think that he's on a Tony Stark arc. I think that there are clear parallels being drawn between Loki and Tony Stark. I think clear enough that we need to look at this as a redemption story for him, as the opportunity. And it's something similar with Nebula, where Nebula had that knowledge about the person she became, and she was unable to accept it. She couldn't accept that she could do that. Now, she had a very limited time to do it, but nevertheless, she couldn't accept the fact that she did it, and she ended up being killed by herself, right, by her future self. And so I think that, this now is his chance to do that. And now, if the TVA is run by variants that are there in the TVA, what if the TVA stays open and Loki stays at the TVA in this variant form and gets to stay in the TVA and show up at times at different places in the MCU? And now it's a little out there, but it'd be kind of cool. A way to keep Hiddleston in the MCU.
Well, I mean, the thing about the TVA is once all these people find out they're variants, is the TVA still going to exist? And S brought up a good point. He said the look he gave Wilson before he jumped into the portal in episode 2 seemed to indicate he was still on their side. What if Loki is trying to get, turn Sylvie, on, see if he can turn her good and say, hey, this is what our scope ends up. We Lokis, we all end up dying. Let's try to change that. But then on the flip side too, it's difficult as well, because now that he's learning this information about the TVA, and the more he learns, he was already very weary of trusting them, and the magical timeline and everything like that. So it's really going to interesting to see how this all plays out when these people find out that they're all variants, how they react to it. Are we going to end up seeing, the timekeepers at all? There's so much to unravel in only 3 episodes, and this was a shorter episode, so I'm hoping that we get a longer episode, for the finale or something to make up for it. We really haven't. I don't think we've gone much past an hour in any of the previous series, but hopefully we get these elongated episodes for the last 3 because this one was a little bit shorter. But man, it's gonna be a lot to unpack here in the next 3 episodes.
I agree. So listen, let's open up the floor. Anyone that wants to come up and kind of either give an opinion or give a theory or just chat about the episode, hit the request button and we'll bring you up and we'll have a little conversation, a little dialogue. I do. So S brought up the point of what if it happened in that shed when she's trying to enchant him, and this is part of the thing. He's like, he looks at her and like, are you trying to enchant me? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, my mind is too strong. He knows, like, it kind of tells me and tells the audience, I think, that he knows, right, that how to enchant someone, even though he plays dumb about it later on. And so I think that could be, I don't know, but that could be kind of part of it where he's kind of swerving it there and saying, well, how do you do this,
Or maybe she did enchant him there because remember, we heard the same thing. My mind is too strong for your little powers or whatever he said to Scarlet Witch. And Thor got enchanted, he said almost the same thing. My mind's too strong. And maybe this whole time Loki was enchanted. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, because you're right. That's a great point because Thor does say that, like, you can't do that to me, and she does it anyways. And he's like, oh crap. So,
right.
Yeah, that definitely could have happened. That could be really interesting. And so, well, then look, Emily, let's bring Justin up here. What's up, Justin? How's it going, buddy?
What's going on, guys? It's good to hear your voice, and kind of odd to hear your voice in a non-football sense, but
It's true.
I'm enjoying the conversation.
Glad to have you here.
I'm curious what you guys think just in general about. I've loved all the Disney Plus shows so far. This one more than the other two, and the other two to varying degrees. But the whole weekly schedule thing, and I mentioned there in the chat, I love it because it gives me something to look forward to, and I like that there's one midweek now, and so Wednesdays are fun for that reason. But this was most pronounced for me with Evan Peters, the Quicksilver actor in WandaVision, when we have weekly episodes and then we spend the next week debating and talking and coming up with theories and who's it going to be and what's going to happen, which is really fun. It also, for me, has lent itself to like some disappointment. When his character reveal, I think, was the worst thing they've done so far with these TV shows, which was probably a good thing. That it was kind of minor and was the worst thing. But that was disappointing. And so that's happened a couple different times. Was he going to be Mephisto? And he just ended up being no one. How do you guys feel about that? About the fact that, we work ourselves up with all these theories that usually don't end up happening, like Josh said.
It's difficult, because I just binge watched 2 shows on Netflix. I just watched Sweet Tooth and I just watched Black Summer episode season 2, and it was great to be able to have them back and forth, but there was no suspense to it. There was no, okay, let's just get to the next episode. You're exactly right. I mean, it lends itself to this discussion and these fan theories and stuff like that. But we also hype ourselves up. And if you were here when we were talking about WandaVision and when we were talking about Falcon Winter Soldier, we did that to the nth level. We're like, who's going to be there? Who's going to be the who is it for Falcon Winter Soldier? It ended up being Sharon Carter.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is it going to be Thunderbolt Ross?
Power Broker. Yeah.
The Power Broker. Is it going to be Thunderbolt Ross? Is it going to be somebody else? What kind of cameos are going to be in there? And like we kind of built ourselves up. So I think this episode we've really kind of limited ourselves, and that's why I mentioned to Pat too when we were getting, he was talking about his option 3. I'm like, that'd be amazing, but again, let's not get our hopes up because of these exact things. I mean, it's human nature to want. I mean, if you I peeked at the cast list, so and
exactly. That's what makes it fun.
Not to mention in the cast list for WandaVision, it had it had Spader on there. So we're like, oh, is Ultron going to be alive in some form? Is he going to be there in some? So it's like a double-edged sword, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
get to have this discussion and this great analysis and breakdown and weekly conversation, but at the same time, you fill your head with things that it could be or should be instead of just being able to enjoy it if it was, a series that was all put out at one time. Pat.
Well, I mean, the thing I'll say is that for the content creators, for the people like us and the guys like, Screen Crush and new rock stars and all those other guys, like, I mean, it's great for them because we have to sit around and talk about it and everything else. And they make a million videos every week about, well, this could be that and this could be that. And how come? And so, like, yeah. And then when that leads itself to is that we're analyzing every single little tiny detail. Okay, well, there's this and there's that. And there's, well, he mentioned this. And we see this off in the distance. That could be, I mean, there's a million things that we talk about. And not all of them can be true. And the other part of it, too, that we have to think about is that, like, at some point, right, they can't do everything, because then the show would just be disjointed. Then we're like, well, okay, you brought in Mephisto and you brought in this guy and you did this and you did that. And it's like, whoa, there's too much stuff going on, So it's like, so as much as we want that to always be something, sometimes it just isn't. I did think, going back to the WandaVision thing, it was interesting they used Evan Peters. I thought was weird. That was a strange decision.
Yeah. It was like almost like a wink nudge
right.
but that's all you're going to get kind of thing.
Right. And so it was, that was kind of interesting.
Easter eggs too. I mean, to that point too, Pat. The Easter eggs that they put out throughout these shows make us, everything's under a microscope. Everyone's watching frame for frame, slowing it down, watching in slow mo, looking at frames and stuff. And some of those Easter eggs in WandaVision and in Falcon Winter Soldier was like, are they gonna do? Oh, well, that means that, and that correlates with that, and this correlates with this. Is this person gonna, or are they gonna show, or are they gonna allude to this? So, yeah.
The one last week was the first like big theory that I had heard that was actually true, right? About the variants, about the TVA agents being variants. That was the first one out of any, and I don't really count the Falcon Winter Soldier one because that one was fairly cookie cutter. It wasn't necessarily 100, but it was no real big reveal from anything else like that. And so, but from WandaVision and from this is like the first like real big one that it was like, whoa, and I guess maybe some people guess it might have been Lady Loki as well. So, but this one is going in an interesting direction.
Even in Falcon Winter Soldier, when Sam's like, what do you want me to do to the wings? Keep him. We're like, oh, is he going to be the new Falcon?
Right.
Because that's what happens in the comics. So it's like, we still kind of hypothesize, are we going to see this guy as Falcon later on?
Well, and that's some of the stuff to think about too, is that like we have an entire MCU to deal with this stuff and not just one show. That's what makes these a little interesting because like that could pay off 2 years from now in a Young Avengers TV show comes out and he's Falcon in it, and we're like, oh my God, there's that guy, blah, 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 whatever. So it is interesting to kind of to see that, and then also to have the patience to sit around and say, okay, like they're going to do something with it. It's coming eventually. We'll get there. They're going to use it, and so just to kind of have that faith in them. I'm sorry that they should do that. So it's interesting. I will say the one thing I love about the weekly shows is that. And especially in WandaVision, I mean, if you watch the making of WandaVision, it's so amazing. And if you were binging those shows, right, those first 2 episodes, the first really 3 episodes, you would fly through those first 3 episodes without even thinking about it. You'd never watch them again. You'd be like, oh, whatever. But the way that they were released and the way they came out, you didn't have a choice. You had to watch them over and over again. So you watched each of those episodes 2-3 times, and the amount of painstaking detail they put into those episodes was amazing. I mean, going through and watching the making of how they filmed it in front of a live studio audience, how they went and talked to, the actors from the 60s and 70s and 80s, and, what did it look like? They tried to recreate what it looked like on set for those people when they were filming. And they tried to make that an authentic experience, which I just thought was, they didn't have to do that. Right? It was not necessary for them to do that, but they went above and beyond. And I think it really showed. I mean, to me, those episodes are phenomenal but people didn't want that. They wanted like